This map highlights a 65-mile strip known as the Suwałki Gap, the only land bridge connecting the Baltic states to Europe. Because of its narrow geography, planners worry hostile forces could easily close this corridor shut, completely severing the Baltics from Allied reinforcement. This vulnerability exists because the choke point is wedged directly between two heavily armed regions, the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad to the west and the Russian allied nation of Belarus to the east. Relying on a defensive posture here requires waiting for an adversary to make the first move. That leaves Allied forces in a permanently reactive position, constantly hoping a tiny strip of land holds up under pressure. Which raises a controversial tactical question. What if Poland doesn't wait? Imagine a scenario where Polish forces launch a sudden preemptive morning offensive to seize the major Belarusian logistical hubs of Brest and Grodno. On this map, capturing those cities pushes the front line 150 miles east, creating a massive physical buffer zone. By holding these hubs, the new lines physically sever the land connection between Belarus and Kaliningrad, isolating the Russian exclave entirely. Based strictly on the geometry of a military map, an offensive maneuver perfectly neutralizes the geographic vulnerability. The gap is secured. However, the moment Polish tanks cross that border, they trigger a severe legal consequence, immediately voiding their protection under the North Atlantic Treaty. Article 5 is strictly a defensive pact. The alliance is legally bound to respond only to an unprovoked armed attack. Nations like France and Germany would likely condemn the preemptive strike immediately. To avoid a catastrophic global war, they would be forced to suspend Poland's alliance protections. By attempting to secure the border alone, Poland would actually achieve the Kremlin's most ambitious strategic goal, the total fracturing of Western unity. Trading international law for a tactical buffer zone achieves little except stripping a country of its allies, turning it into an isolated pariah state. Even ignoring the politics, holding foreign territory requires vastly more resources than a lightning strike. Occupying hostile urban centers demands hundreds of thousands of troops to manage a highly resistant population. Supplying those troops rapidly becomes a logistical nightmare. Convoys would face fierce local partisan sabotage, and they would be forced to move supplies across a railway network built on a different track gauge than the rest of Europe. Any air cover provided by advanced Polish jets would run straight into the world's densest integrated air defense network stationed directly inside Belarus. Furthermore, the inevitable Russian counterattack wouldn't need to punch through the newly established front lines. They would bypass the border entirely using long-range bombers and saturation missile strikes aimed directly at domestic infrastructure deep inside Poland. Pushing the front line forward simply stretches the supply chain until it breaks. A swift tactical victory rapidly degrades into a grueling, static war of attrition. Then there is the ultimate risk. Russia views Belarusian territory through its Union State doctrine, an agreement that essentially merges the defensive perimeters of both nations. According to this updated military doctrine, Moscow is legally permitted to respond with nuclear weapons to any conventional aggression that threatens Belarusian sovereignty. Facing a highly modernized Polish army, Russia might bypass a conventional fight entirely. They could launch a demonstration strike, a low-yield nuclear detonation over an empty area, designed to shock Polish forces into an immediate retreat. A brilliant conventional maneuver on a map means absolutely nothing once the nuclear threshold is crossed. We are left with a horrific resulting scenario. By pushing into Belarus, Poland finds itself fighting a brutal two-front war entirely alone, standing on the edge of a nuclear exchange. This perfectly illustrates the concept of a first-move disadvantage in modern strategic warfare. Security in the modern era relies on institutional alliances. Initiating a conflict to gain a short-term tactical edge automatically destroys the very treaties designed to provide long-term safety. Military maps fail to account for political reality. In the complex web of global deterrence, the side that starts the war inevitably loses the alliance that was meant to protect them.